I don't think there's been an indie RPG with as much hype and expectation behind it as Sea of Stars had. People may compare the game to Chained Echoes, which did have some noticeable expectations, but in my completely subjective opinion, Sea of Stars had more reasons for high expectations, which is why it garnered more attention. What with Sabotage's well-received previous game, The Messenger, the specific allusions to the great RPGs of yore, a very successful funding campaign, and the involvement of Yasunori Mitsuda, Sea of Stars had a lot going to get people's attention. We just had to hope that the result would satisfy the hype. For me at least, Sea of Stars more than matched my expectations. Sea of Stars is a turn-based RPG developed and published by Sabotage Studio. It is a prequel game to Sabotage's previous game, The Messenger, although the gameplay style is entirely different between the two games. The game was first announced with a Kickstarter campaign as Sabotage wished to self-publish for this game, and the game was funded in under 7 hours. On top of that, Sabotage Studio also got investment from Kowloon Knights to help the studio realize the scope that they had hoped for. Sea of Stars does have a demo out for all platforms, I believe, for those who want to get a taste before buying. The game did initially set an expected 2022 release, but later was delayed to 2023 to polish the game while maintaining developer health. The game came out August 29th, 2023 for PC, Switch, Xbox One, Xbox Series, PS4, and PS5 with day one releases on the Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus services as well. The game's release was greeted with very strong critical reviews, similarly positive user feedback, and an announcement less than a week after the release that the game had already sold 250,000 copies. That 250,000 number was in fact what Sabotage Studio had predicted for the game's first year sales in total, so to call Sea of Stars a success would be a significant understatement. At the beginning of the game, you get to pick which character will be leading your party between Valere and Zale. This decision makes no difference on the story, so feel free to pick whoever you wish. Valere and Zale are the two newest Solstice warriors. Children born on either of the solstices gain magic powered by either the moon or sun to use. Their magic is also the only known ability capable of damaging the fearsome dwellers that have been terrorizing the land for many years. After a long time of training, Valere and Zale are ready to set out, together with their childhood friend Garl. Their goal? To bring a final peace to their world, and work to end the Fleshmancer's influence once and for all. The story and writing each have their pros and cons. The story premise is intriguing, and the tale takes several twists and turns over the course of the game. I certainly found myself emotionally invested in several of the characters and their plot points. There were even some nice side adventures and stories that reached satisfying conclusions on top of the main story. However, all that I said about the characters is somewhat undercut by Valere and Zale not really having a lot of personality themselves. The main protagonists of the story are critical for keeping us interested and invested, and Valere and Zale are simply bland. They're not bad, but they also do not enhance the story by being in it, which is unfortunate. The writing itself has some distinct strengths. As I said, the side adventures and characters really work for me, and I think that's because the world they developed has a lot of charm. These feel like distinct characters trying their best to live in this world, and that helped suck me into the world itself. At least as long as the game avoided some of its more egregious fourth wall breaks. I say this as a fan of meta humor. There are limits to it. Overall then, I think the story was fine. There were twists and turns that worked beautifully in the story, and the writing was good when it took itself and the world it was building seriously, but there were some aspects that weren't done as well, and it kind of brought down the overall product without making it a negative overall. One of the highlights of the demo that I played prior to the full release was the dungeon, and specifically the puzzles within the dungeon. I was very pleased that the level of quality for the dungeons kept up throughout the entire game. Sea of Stars embraced some puzzle aspects without overdoing it, and usually tied it with mechanics we were already using throughout the game, such as controlling the time of day, or the traversal methods. There are very few games of this type that I feel such joy from simply moving around the map, but Sea of Stars is one of them. I like how they designed their environments, hinting at things around the area that you then have to locate the way to get to them on your way to your main goal. My eagerness to explore around each area was always encouraged by the treasures, meals, and resources I could gather by doing so. That's what made my time enjoyable with the dungeons as well. The more time I took to explore everything they had to offer, the more I felt I gained from doing so. Plus, the puzzles were pretty much at my perfect difficulty range, which is nice. Enemy encounters happen in the areas, and you are able to engage enemies and get a quick advantage if you time things up right. I loved when I got the grappling hook item, so I could shoot that out to gain that advantage easier than before. You have 3 characters active in battle, and the turns are interleaved with the enemies. Each enemy has a countdown till they move again, which gives you plenty of information for planning out your battle moves. I like how the turn system goes as well, with you getting to choose between your allies as to who goes when. Just an extra bit of control that adds different dynamics and choices to your battle strategy. Your characters have a standard attack as well as 3 skills, plus an ultimate skill later on. And a big part of battle is proper management of your MP to make sure you have abilities ready when you need them. One feature Sea of Stars has that I have really enjoyed is the ability to swap characters immediately in battle and swap back if necessary. Just a small detail that I enjoyed in 8-Bit Adventures 2 earlier this year, and now with Sea of Stars as well. In advance of big abilities, enemies have a series of locks that show up with different attack or element types. Breaking all the locks prevents the ability from happening, but it's not always straightforward on how you do it with the turns given. I like this aspect of combat as it gave some variety in how I played depending on what locks showed up and changed the value I placed on certain skills. Another piece that will help with this are the live mana boosts you can give characters, which helps you use moon, sun, other elements when you don't have MP, or allows you to just enhance your attacks. Finally, the most unique aspect of the game's combat is how it deals with characters reaching 0 health. In those cases, your party member is knocked out with a few stars flying around their bodies. Those number of stars corresponds with how many turns it'll take for them to revive with some of their health back. Each time a character is knocked out in battle, though, it takes longer and longer for them to revive. I like the system as a way to make it so one teammate falling isn't an automatic game over. Again, I love when games give me tools that can help me turn a battle around if things aren't going well. Overall, I liked Sea of Stars combat. Due to the limited number of party members and skills though, there does tend to be monotony towards the end because the game has nothing new to add to the combat. However, I think the length of the game keeps the combat fresh for most of the run, and the lack of further depth only becomes noticeable if you're going for a longer playthrough or trying to grind for some reason. Grinding is not necessary. The combat does have one more notable aspect, and that's the timing hits. In order to do maximum damage in your regular attacks, you have to press a button at the right time, same for defense. And then there are some abilities like Valaire's Moonerang where you have to do a lot of timing hits. Virgo vs. the Zodiac certainly prepared me for this. At the beginning of the game, this is described in the tutorial as a nice little bonus. That turned out not to be the case. If you are not able to hit those timings, your battles will be significantly harder. Now, the game does have items called relics you can collect and turn on that can either increase the difficulty or decrease it depending on certain aspects of combat, such as the timing. Sea of Stars does give you some ways to manage this part of the combat, but I really wish they had just made it an actual little extra instead of a significant boost/detriment when done incorrectly. Last detail on the combat side of things is that when your whole party levels up, you can choose to give certain stats an extra bonus. I like that extra bit of control on how our party progressed. Speaking of progression, the game offers very limited gold for you during the game, and that makes choosing what equipment you upgrade very important. There are some items you can collect and sell for money, but for the most part I was scraping every single piece to get new armor or weapons. Ingredients, on the other hand, are seriously bountiful. Don't skimp on the food. Use those fires to cook, and feel free to use meals without reservation in combat from beginning to end. You will not run out. Sea of Stars also has plenty of side content. Most of it isn't really side quests, but you'll know them when you see them. There are these special treasure chests with rainbow conches in them that you can exchange with someone for prizes. Later on in the game, you can collect music notes for a band to play in the various taverns you visit during the game, and plans to use to construct buildings in a certain village. You also have a character named Teeks who travels with you on occasion, who is a special traveling historian and can tell you stories from certain objects you find. I enjoyed her stories. Give me all that historical storytelling plus additional lore. On top of that, you have the 3 big mini-games. Fishing, which is a very basic fishing game, and the only one of the mini-games I completed fully as of writing the script. You also have a quiz game that asks questions about various topics surrounding the game, like what enemies appear in what areas or details on the world. Finally, you have the competitive mini-game called Wheels, which is a sort of slot machine strategy game. I started reading the rules to it and then decided to just play and figure it out myself, but if you want a guide on how to play, I'll direct you to the article in the description instead. There are casual and champion difficulty games you can play of wheels, but because of the slot machine element of the game, luck plays a significant role. I raged more at this friggin' minigame than any other part of the game. I like my minigames to be more skill-based, but the AI is not playing you on a level playing field from the get-go. I'm not saying it's a bad minigame, but if it wasn't addicting to play, I wouldn't have continued with it. As you can see, that is plenty of additional content on top of the main story, and then you have the true ending. The game does have a regular ending and a true one, and the true one isn't as easy to get as some other games' true endings have been in the past. I'd say it adds another 5 to 8 hours onto the game time if you want to pursue it, but I know people who really want that extra time. At last, this brings me to the part that enticed a lot of people to try Sea of Stars in the first place, and that is the presentation. The game is simply that gorgeous. The vibrancy of the world is continuous throughout the game, so much color and life in the various environments, and I encourage players to simply take a look around in each area to see the details. Now, the environments do occasionally suffer from the unclear differences in height of terrain that Crosscode also struggled with. Especially in darker areas, it was sometimes hard to see if I was able to jump up, over, or down to the area I needed to go. The character designs are more basic. They aren't bad, but there's also not much that I think stands out about them compared to the amazing environments. One thing I didn't expect to see in the game were the animated cutscenes. There were only a few of them, but they're nice glimpses of moments that probably wouldn't have worked as well in the pixel art style. I have both praise and critique for the general animation of the game. Like the environments, there are so many great details when you examine how characters are animated. There's the early gag of Teaks, but also smaller things like Sarai walking over narrow beams and ropes just like she walks over normal ground, unlike the rest of the party. It builds character organically. That's the good part. The bad part is that certain animations go on far too long. Sea of Stars is a game that would benefit from a turbo mode for certain moments. Oh, and also a skip scene or speed up dialogue option. Those quality of life features would improve the game. The music is lovely. Much like the art, I think this shows most clearly in the environment themes, and clearly Mitsuda put in some great work with his guest tracks, but I also want to acknowledge the good work done by Rainbow Dragon Eyes on the rest of the tracks. I do think certain tracks got overplayed, especially in battle, but the music itself was always nice to listen to. I did do a double take when I first heard the fishing area music because it's so reminiscent of Stardew Valley music. The UI and UX was very clean and smooth. Apart from the aforementioned lighting plus terrain issues, it was apparent what was and wasn't important for progression on screen. Then you come to movement and how things respond, and the game feels nice to move around in. Battle especially could have been chaotic, but I think the game is consistently giving you all the important information. Sea of Stars' presentation gets the highest praise from me of any element regarding this game. Sea of Stars doesn't skimp on the vision of a game inspired by classics like Chrono Trigger while keeping some of the modern conveniences to make for a strong overall experience. In the areas the game misstepped, the rest of the package helped pick up the slack and led to an enjoyable ride for me. There are many who absolutely love this game, and I can see why, even if I can't quite reach that level myself. However, I can certainly recommend Sea of Stars to RPG fans new and old as a quality game through and through. Thank you for watching. If you would be so kind as to hit the like and subscribe buttons before you go, I would be extremely grateful. If you'd also like to join the conversation in the comments, I would love to hear your thoughts on Sea of Stars, and I hope to see you in the next video as well. Have a great day, and happy gaming.